Okay, bros, welcome to Singapore. This is Ang Mo Kio Town Center. Okay, lots of things selling because it's a National Day period coming in August. But things in Singapore are not cheap, quite pricey. Okay, just to share a story to tell you about the difference between Singapore and JB, Singapore and Johor. Things in Singapore are expensive, but in Johor, JB, it is significantly cheaper. In Singapore, you can't even buy a bag of ice for your drink from the coffee shops. The coffee shops will not sell you a small bag of ice. Probably the only place you can buy it is from the supermarket. So let me show you the price of a cup of ice at the supermarket. Okay, so $1.20. $1.20 for a small cup of ice. Wow. Can you believe that? $1.20 for a small cup of ice. In JB, you can buy a big bag of ice for 50 cents ringgit. Okay, so that cup of ice is almost 4 ringgit. In JB, you can get more ice than that for only 50 cents ringgit. So at the coffee shops in Singapore, they will never sell you ice. And hot water costs maybe 40 cents, 50 cents for a glass of hot water. So just based on the ice alone, you can see the difference between Singapore and Johor. Don't even talk about other food items and other things. Just comparing the ice alone, you can see the huge difference between Singapore and Johor, JB. You know, Singapore has good infrastructure and a lot of buildings, a lot of shelter, a lot of built up areas, but we are all paying a price. We are all paying high prices for all the convenience. High prices because everything is imported, a lot of food is imported, and we have limited land, and the rental prices are very high, and manpower, labor costs are also quite high for businesses. Okay, so let me share with you a story comparing Singapore and JB, comparing a simple thing like coffee tea. Okay, in JB a glass of coffee tea is around 2 ringgit. Usually 2 ringgit you can enjoy a beautiful glass of coffee or tea, hot coffee or tea. In Singapore nowadays is at least $1.50 for a hot coffee or tea at a coffee shop. $1.50, that's about almost 5 ringgit. 5 ringgit in Singapore for a glass of coffee or tea. In JB it's only 2 ringgit. In Singapore, almost 5 ringgit. So the difference is 2 to 3 times. That is a huge difference just to drink a glass of coffee or tea at a coffee shop. And nowadays the glass of coffee or tea in Singapore are quite small. You know, the glass is very heavy, but the amount of coffee and tea is shrinking. You know, shrinking. This is a shrinkflation. All the food items are suffering shrinkflation, shrinking in quantity. So I was at the coffee shop in the suburb in Singapore after midnight. It was around 2 a.m. It was around 2 a.m. in the morning at the coffee shop. I was drinking a glass of tea. And you know, the quantity is small. You drink it very fast. And it costs about $1.50 at least. So as I was drinking up most of the glass, I wanted to top up hot water. So I asked the lady server to give me some hot water to top up the glass. So the lady at the coffee stall scolded me and said, "There are 4 cameras on the ceiling looking down. I cannot give you free water. I cannot give you any free hot water." So she refused to top up any hot water to my glass. Not even a single drop of hot water for my $1.50 glass of tea. In JB, they will give you a whole glass of hot water free of charge. So she refused to top up any hot water for me, so I was pissed off and I just left and went back to my table to finish my little bit of tea left in the glass. So can you imagine in Singapore? In Singapore, at 2 a.m. at a coffee shop where there's hardly any people, at 2 a.m. at a suburb coffee shop, and the stall refuses to give you a single drop of hot water to add to your tea. How amazing is that? That is Singapore. Welcome to Singapore. Even hot water costs money. I think nowadays 50 cents for a glass of hot water. You know, ridiculous. How ridiculous is that? They won't even give you any hot water to top up to the $1.50 glass of tea at 2 a.m. in the morning when there's hardly anyone. So I think sometimes Singapore gets quite ridiculous nowadays with the prices and shrinkflation. In JB, you can get 2 or 3 glasses of hot water free and they will still smile at you. That's why Singaporeans still like to go JB. That's why it's still worth going JB from Singapore. You know, in JB, Johor, they don't charge you for freaking water. So I was actually quite pissed off with that experience of 2 a.m. in the morning at a coffee shop and I can't even get some hot water free of charge. And all these situations are the result of the government. The government can change such situations, whether they want to change. You know, the government has allowed such situations to exist where you can't even get some hot water free of charge. That's ridiculous. We Singaporeans serve the country, Singapore, for 2.5 years in the army, in the air force, in the navy. We Singapore men sacrificed 2.5 years to die for the country, to protect the country, and to die for the country at war. And what is so sad, at 2 a.m. in the morning at the suburb coffee shop, you can't even get some hot water free of charge. How ridiculous is that? We die for the country, but the country can't even give us some hot water at 2 a.m. in the morning. That's why sometimes life in Singapore is freaking ridiculous. That's why you cannot confine yourself to Singapore. You have to go to JB, go to Johor, go to Malaysia. Because life and the world is not just about Singapore. Everywhere has good and bad. So you got to go where there is good and see the places for the good things that they have. You know, Singapore may be very organized and very efficient and very structured, but Singapore is just a cage, a beautiful bird cage. Singapore is just a beautiful bird cage. So don't think of yourself as a beautiful bird in a beautiful bird cage. The world outside your bird cage has far more beauty that you can discover. So don't think Singapore is everything. Don't think Singapore is super great. It's just a beautiful bird cage. Go to JB, go to Johor, go to Malaysia and find the good that they have there. And seek to use the best of both worlds of Singapore and Malaysia. Because we, the average citizens of Singapore, are not bloody rich. So we are not the bloody rich and powerful people in Singapore who can freaking throw their money around in Singapore. Okay, we are not the rich and powerful people in Singapore who can spend money like drinking water. So don't be stupid and confine yourself to Singapore. Singapore is for the rich. The average Singaporeans are just struggling so that the rich can enjoy their big money. Okay, so coming back to the story of the ice. Okay, $1.20 for that freaking small cup of ice at the supermarket in Singapore. And Singapore coffee shops will refuse to sell you any ice because they only want you to purchase the drinks, which are very costly. Okay, so let me tell you another story of JB. Okay, I was at JB, I was at the KSL area, and there was a coffee shop, you know. There was a coffee shop nearby the KSL resort shopping mall, you know, and they sell wonton mee there and some Chinese food and other stalls. And also they have a coffee tea stall. So I passed by and I wanted a bag of ice. So I went to the coffee stall and I asked the lady, I want to buy a bag of ice for my drink. So she went to get a small bag with a straw, a takeaway bag with a straw, and she filled it up with a lot of ice, about 3/4 full bag of ice. Then I saw, okay, I wanted a full bag. She only gave me 3/4 full bag of ice. So I said, top up the bag full and I'll pay you 50 cents for the full bag of ice. Then the lady told me, oh, it's okay, I give to you free. This bag of ice I give to you free. So I said I wanted a full bag. So she pointed me towards one big bucket, ice box bucket full of ice, and she asked me to go to that big bucket of ice and take whatever ice I want to take, free of charge. So I went over to the big bucket of ice, filled up my bag full of ice with a straw, and closed the big bucket, and I waved to the lady and thanked her, and I walked off. She gave me the plastic bag, the straw, and a lot of ice free of charge. Usually it's 50 cents at a coffee shop in JB. So I was quite surprised. So this experience simply clearly tells you the difference between Singapore and JB. In Singapore, if you walk away from a coffee shop with a bag full of ice, it's a crime. In JB, the coffee shop lady will just give you whatever ice you want. Even if you have to pay 50 cents, it's very cheap. 50 cents ringgit is only like not even 20 cents Singapore cents for a full bag of ice with a straw. In Singapore, you ask for a bag of ice, they will scold you, tell you the cameras are recording you, and they will call the police to arrest you if you take the ice away. They won't even sell you any ice, not a single cube of ice in Singapore coffee shops. Okay, so in Singapore, no free hot water for you. You cannot buy any ice from the coffee shop. Okay, you cannot buy any ice anywhere for your own drink unless you want to pay $1.20 for a freaking small cup of ice from the supermarket. So this is what you get in Singapore for serving 2 years of national service in the Army, Air Force and the Navy, or the SCDF. This is ridiculous. I think the PAP government can treat Singaporeans better, especially Singapore men who die for the country. Singapore men who die for the country in the Army, in the Navy, in the Air Force and the SCDF or the police. The Singapore government definitely can treat Singaporeans better, especially the Singapore men who sacrifice to protect the country, sacrifice their lives and die for the country. You can't even get free hot water or buy a bag of ice. Freaking ridiculous in Singapore. So go to JB, go to Johor nearby and find some freedom and enjoy your life. Enjoy the nature, enjoy the green surroundings, and enjoy some peace away from the freaking crowds in Singapore. Okay, the RTS link between Singapore and JB is starting at the end of the year, so you have no reason not to go to JB Johor and get out of your beautiful Singapore bird cage. You are not a tiny beautiful bird in a beautiful bird cage. You are an eagle. Go to Johor and fly like an eagle. Everything is cheaper there in JB Johor and still pretty good. Okay, don't be stuck in the beautiful Singapore bird cage. Find your freedom, find your peace. Find your interests, find your passions, find your opportunities. Find your opportunities in Johor to make your life better. Don't just be a beautiful bird in the Singapore bird cage. Okay, so that's why the RTS is built. The RTS is built to free you from the Singapore bird cage. So use the RTS and find your freedom in Johor. Okay, the RTS link starting at the end of the year will be the most happening thing between Singapore and JB in 100 years. If you don't go to JB Johor, you are missing out. You are just a beautiful bird in the Singapore bird cage. Free yourself, free your mind. Hit the RTS and fly like an eagle.